portion. Behar and Bechukotai. Behar and Bechukotai. In other words, what this also allows us to do is a chazak v'nit chazek on the book of Vayikra, the book of Leviticus, which is called Leviticus because the primary focus of this entire book, from the beginning all the way through, from the very start, from Vayikra Hashem Moshe, the God calls out to Moshe, Adam ki akriv mikem karban Hashem, was all about divine service, right? The book of Bereshit kind of tells us the backstory, all the story of the patriarchs, the creation of the world through the patriarchs, so kind of that's the introductory. Shemot kind of talks about the Exodus, etc., and the events of the Jewish people. That is the first half of, let's say, the current story, giving the context of the Torah, with Bamidbar and Dvarim being the second half. But Vayikra kind of sits in the middle, and it doesn't really advance the story chronologically anything, if at all. An entire book of the Torah that kind of pulls us back from the working our way through the timeline of events, and is entirely focused on discussing serving God with the offerings and service of the Kohanim in the temple and all those things. And obviously the modern day iterations of those things with prayer instead of the offerings and devotions of whatever particular devotion we are talking about. The book of Leviticus is the kind of the primary source for all these conversations. So that is what the book of Leviticus.
But doesn't Leviticus mean something to do with law in Latin?
No, I don't know what it means in Latin. I think Leviticus, the association here is, as we call it also in Hebrew, the Sefer Leviah, the book of the Levites, because there was a tribe of Levi that comprised all those that served in the temple, not only the Levites, but even the Kohanim. The other way to refer to the Kohanim by their genealogy, not just by their title position, which was Kohanim would mean the priests, but they were also known as Aharonim, right? Levim and Aharonim, but even because they were all descendants of Aaron. But Aaron is himself a descendant and from the tribe of Levi. So Leviticus, I think, is a reference to that. They were they were not the only ones who did the service, but the primary drivers of the service that we all have to engage in. So the book of, and this is, as we've mentioned a few times in Shul over the course of reading through the Torah portions of Leviticus, of Vayikra, that this is the book that a child is meant to begin with at the beginning of education. You don't begin with Bereshit, but you actually begin with the book of Vayikra. Yavo tahorim v'yistasku b'tahara. Let the pure ones come and engage in the study of the pure service. And so that's why you start primarily with the book of Leviticus, because all the rest of the books talk about periods of good behavior and bad behavior, right? From the very beginning of the Torah, the book of the very first parsha ends up with the corruption of man, right? That eventually leads to the second Torah portion, which is the flood and the wiping out. So pretty much every other book deals with negativity in discussions and references to evil and the warning against evil. But the book of Leviticus doesn't really have that. It is entirely pure. It stays focused on pure and holy and saintly service. And so now we are at the chazak v'nit chazek of this book of the Torah, closing out this holy book of the Torah. All books are holy, but this one is obviously and openly holy in the sense that its theme has been entirely the holy service. Now, the opening verse of this Torah portion gives us a very well-known quip or one-liner that has become embedded into Jewish Talmudic jargon. In English, we say, "What does one thing have to do with the other?" Or some people use an expression, what does this have to do with the price of rice in China, right? Or the price of tea in Pakistan, whatever version of that is, And the way you say that in Talmudic jargon is Ma'inyan Shemitah Eitzel Har Sinai. What does the sabbatical year have to do with Mount Sinai? Now, while the price of rice in China or the price of tea in Pakistan is meant to be a non sequitur, in Judaism nothing is purely a non sequitur. Everything has purpose, and that expression of what does the sabbatical year have to do with Sinai is a reference to a quote that comes in the beginning of this week's Torah portion, cited by Rashi. What's the situation? What is the verse that almost always introduces a new set of commands from God? When God is going to give us a command of anything, let it be Shabbat, may it be building the temple, be it offerings, the verse that always introduces it is Vayidaber Hashem. Finish Moshe Lemor, right? God said to Moshe, saying, whatever it is that follows. Right? So we're about to introduce a new set of laws, the laws of the sabbatical year. Okay? The laws of that 6 years you work the land, on the 7th year you shall allow the land to lie fallow. And introducing it, the verse is almost Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe Lemor, but it's not. There is two added words before it introduces the sabbatical year, and it says as follows: Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe Behar Sinai Lemor. And that's where we get the name of the parsha, Behar.
Behar Sinai. Behar Sinai.
And God told Moses at Mount Sinai the following.
Oh, that's how you say at?
What?
Behar Sinai is the way you say at?
Means in the vicinity of Mount Sinai, not embedded in the mountain, but Behar means at the mountain, basically, or in the vicinity of the mountain. But the point being that for whatever reason, and this is so, the Talmud asks the obvious question. Nothing in Torah is random, and if the Torah decides to here deliberately to cite the location of this command, right, it has to be deliberate, which means there's got to be some connection with the theme of what's about to be commanded and the location that we specifically chose to cite. So we said, this one, we want to make sure you know that this was at Mount Sinai. There's a lot of commands. Most of the commands of the Torah were given while the Jewish people were still at the foot of the mountain, and this being one of them, but we never felt the need to mention that, to reference that, to say, Vayidaber Hashem Moshe Behar Sinai Lemor. So this causes the Talmud to ask the rhetorical question, Ma inyan Shmita Eitzel Har Sinai. What does Shemitah, what does the sabbatical year have to do with Mount Sinai that we deliberately had to mention that this command about Shemitah took place while Moshe was standing in the vicinity of Sinai? Okay? And that, again, if you want to really just blow any yeshivas of Behar away with your kind of encyclopedic knowledge of Jewish jargon, then the next time you hear any of them say something that seems to be a non sequitur, and you want to kind of say, what does one thing have to do with the other? You say, "Ma'in Shemitah Leitzar Sinai." You just, if you say it like that, they're like, "What? How do you know that expression?" That's like a really yeshivish jargon to just drop that line. But again, the source of it is this question. So, what in fact is the answer? Why does the Torah choose that in the introduction of the concept of the sabbatical year to make a point that this was given at Sinai, that this one was given in the vicinity of Sinai? And again, it's not just some small matter, because we named the entire Torah portion Behar, which is highlighting that reference, that geographical reference of this command. That God went out of his way to specifically tell us that this command was given as Moses was standing, as the Jewish people were standing at Mount Sinai. Well, what's the connection between Shemitah, the sabbatical year, and Sinai? And because we don't have a lot of time, get cut straight to the point. Shemitah is perhaps the mitzvah that most concretizes the Jewish understanding of the relationship between God, the people, and the world. Kind of like Shabbat. Shabbat is it in a microcosm, and Shemitah is it in a macrocosm. because Shemitah is like the year-long Shabbat, which is why it's called the sabbatical year, and we also refer to that as the year of Shabbat. I keep on getting a phone call, and every time I get a phone call, it takes it tries to hijack my phone away from my Zoom meeting. So I apologize for the few interruptions. But anyways, the answer is many other religions present an either-or perspective, either spirituality or physicality. And it doesn't mean that you have to do one or the other, but it means in a very real way that one of them is real and the other of them is not, and one of them is primary and the other one is ancillary, and either this serves that or that serves this. For example, the hedonism of the Romans, etc., they recognized spirituality. They did. This was all still part of a people that were that had a sense of a pantheon of gods and things that are above nature, but all their whole ideology was that all that was to serve the engagement in the appeasement of the gods or serving the gods was all to enhance one's physical life, right? That if you got on the good side of Zeus or Aphrodite, etc., then your living of life, of your physical life, will be enhanced, right? You'll have more wealth, you'll have more riches, you'll have more beauty, you'll have be able to conquer more and take more, and etc. And so we see the embellishments in that came with that, and that's why hedonism was not looked down upon. In fact, it was lauded. And there was nothing wrong, as far as they were concerned, in engaging in physical indulgence and
we have that
and just a embellishment. And I say that we have kind of reverted back to that sense, where in fact most times you hear a sermon in various houses of worships, and it's all like, if you do this, then your life will be good. And what do we mean by your life? We mean your physical and material. So engage in spirituality for the sake of it, of the benefits it will bring to your physicality and your material living. And the Rambam talks about how short-sighted that is. That to engage in with idol worship, basically, this is kind of the driving consideration of idol worship, was not the ignoring of the spiritual, but it was the subverting of the spiritual for the sake of the physical and the material. That you're engaged in these things, but at the end of the day, with a very short-sighted sense that here is the be-all, end-all. And that your life here is what you are investing in. So you invest in stocks and bonds to enhance your physical life, and you invest in going once or twice to appease the gods, or appease the spiritual powers to be, to also enhance your physical and material life. So that's obviously, we can appreciate that is incorrect, that is wrong. But it's also incorrect to think that I have to, in a sense, disengage from the physical in order to engage in the spiritual, that it's all about the spiritual. And so asceticism is what's the order of the day. And if anything, I have to manipulate the physical and drive the physical all towards achieving a uniquely spiritual and ethereal experience. And here comes the Shemitah, which tells us, and again, I'm kind of moving through this quickly, and each of these ideas has to be explored and fleshed out, but trying to make the point before we have to. Shemitah is the culmination of what was given to us at Sinai. Sinai, God came down onto the physical mountain. Spiritual and physical came together because both are an expression of God. And it's not one or the other, and it's not putting one above the other. It's the perfect blend of the both that is shalom, is shalem. God is not asking us, 6 years you will work the land, and on the 7th year you will remind yourself you will not work the land, and remind yourself as to why you work the land. And 6 days a week you shall work and engage with this world, and on the 7th day you shall cease, but not because God really ultimately wants you to cease and be separate and disengaged from the world. But he wants you to remember why you're engaged in the world. The spiritual and the physical come together in a perfect balance, and God's sovereignty is over all of them. So in the Shemitah year, here's the unique thing about Shemitah. Shemitah, you're not allowed to commercially engage in the work of the land. You're not allowed to harvest, you're not allowed to plant, etc., etc. And you have to allow the land to lie fallow. But it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to draw on the bounty of the land. You don't have to sit there and watch all the fruits rot on the tree. In fact, you are more engaged in the land in the Shemitah year than perhaps you're engaged any other time. Why? Because on the Shemitah year, you're allowed to pick the fruits of the tree. Here's the mistake most people make about the Shemitah year. You're allowed to pick the fruits of the tree. In fact, I'm allowed to pick the fruits of my tree or your tree or anybody else's tree. And everybody's allowed to come and pick their fruits from their tree or my tree or everything else. The land is open and available to everybody. The only thing is that we don't engage in the land with like a strategy and a purpose and a harvest, and we're going to set aside and then sell and whatever it is. The commercial engagement in the land falls aside, and in the end, we are not engaged in the commercial, so that we can focus on the spiritual at the same time that we are reaching up and picking that apple off the tree, making a bracha and enjoying this fruit. And it says, in fact, the fruits of Shemitah are holier than any other time of the year. Till this very day, you can get a hold of bottles of wine made from grapes of the Shemitah year. And that is considered, some people, I remember a Rosh Yeshiva of mine, I went to his house for Shabbat, he invited me, which was obviously considered a great honor when I was in Israel, spent a year learning. He invited me, very holy man, still is, still is, Baruch Hashem, he's still with us. Very holy man. I remember he made Kiddush, very venerable man, long white beard. He actually wore the shtreimel. Even though he's Chabadnik, he wore the shtreimel and the payas and struck a figure. He made the Kiddush. And I share the story with a few of you in various contexts. But he said he finishes the Kiddush, and if you know the way Chabad, we overflow the Kiddush cup, which means always there's going to be some rivulet of wine that pours off onto your hand. So remember, he finishes the Kiddush, and then he does something that was distinctly unholy looking, or rather, he went like this. He finished, he drinks the wine, and he puts the cup down, and then goes, he starts, I'm like, what am I looking at here? What am I seeing? And like one of the other guys who was a regular at his table sees kind of my surprised look, and he says, every drop of the Shemitah wine is holy wine. He won't allow a drop of it to just be like soaked up in a napkin and thrown out.
Oh, that's interesting.
So the Shemitah, the physical, the holiness within the physical, the godliness within the physical is manifest even stronger than any other year. And that's why you can't engage in it in this kind of crass, commercialized manner. But you don't have to disengage. You engage, but you engage with a deep sense of the holiness that is found in everything, physical, spiritual, etc.
Wait a minute, so they make the wine after the Shemitah year is over?
No, they take the fruits of the Shemitah year and they make the wine. And they're not allowed to sell it or give it away. No, during, they can make it during.
I thought you said they can't
but
engage
they can't
in
do
the
it for commercial. That's what I said. So they don't sell it. They don't sell it. They give those bottles away. And they give it to people, the holy enough people. Again, that's what I said. It's not disengaging from the physical, but it's engaging in a whole different way. Your relationship with the physical changes. It's not exploitive, and it's not in a sense with a cold, calculated fashion. You're engaged with this physical world entirely in appreciating the bounty that Hashem has given us. The bounty that I have and that you have and that we all share together. And I truly don't own any of this, even if this is in my property on the Shemitah year. It's my property, it's your property, not because of socialism and communism, but with the recognition that it's not that we all own it and nobody owns it. It has an owner, and his name is God. And that's the point. And we are all custodians of his holy, holy resources, because everything that comes from God is holy. So the Shemitah year is actually the culmination of Har Sinai. That's the point. If you want to get a sense of where Har Sinai truly came concretized and was truly at its most expressed and manifest, was in the Shemitah year, where you didn't disengage from the physical and to pursue spirituality entirely. You engage in the physical in a spiritual way, and the physical became spiritual. And we lived with this sense of this harmony of our two worlds, of the spiritual and the physical. One didn't take precedent over the other. The two of them were perfectly in sync, and in a sense, perfectly, and it's a perfect symbiotic relationship, where everything of the physical was there available to us. The fruits on the tree were available to us, and we ate them without qualms about, well, am I going to turn around and sell it to make a profit? Are you going to take it? Or who has more food? We're all in it together. We're all eating. We're all engaged in spiritual pursuits, living in this physical world. And it was a sense of the harmony. And that is why it says when Mashiach comes, we will engage in a Yom Shekulo Shabbat Menucha, an everlasting Shabbos, an everlasting Shemitah year. And why on Shabbat we don't engage in fasting or asceticism, but we engage in and have a day where we cease from work, but we engage and we indulge in the bounty of God's world, physical world. And we enjoy a beautiful Shabbat meal. And that is, in a sense, what Mount Sinai was, and the culmination of it, and in a sense, what we have to achieve. And the echoes of that have to carry on outside of Shabbat and outside of the Shemitah year, which is that when we do engage in the physical, we do carry that sense of holy responsibility when we eat a fruit, because if you reduce the physical world to just commercializing and exploiting and say, I still have to be holy, that's what I'm going to do in my spiritual time, but when my physical time is physical, no. And because that gives you the license to be a different type of person when you're engaged in the physical than when you otherwise are engaged in the spiritual. I'm a different person in shul than when I am in business, and that is not correct. The holy person that I have to be on Shabbat is the holy person I have to be during the week. The holy person I have to be in the synagogue is the holy person I have to be in my place of business, at home, etc. And that is why Shemitah is really the culmination of Sinai. All right, everybody?
Wow, Rabbi,
thank you so much.
You got it all in.
So good to see you.
Yeah. See you Saturday.
Yes. Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Could you repeat?
Shabbat
Wait a minute
shalom.
before you go. Could you repeat that last sentence that you said? That why Shemitah is.
Because Shemitah drives home the point that Judaism, that Mount Sinai, is not about physical over spiritual or spiritual over physical, but rather engaging in the entirety of God's world, spiritual or physical, with a sense of holy purpose. So that even as we are engaged in the material, we are engaged so not as in a separate attitude or mindset than when we are engaged in the spiritual. We are engaged in the physical on Shemitah or any other day of the year, or any other year of the 7-year cycle, or any other day of the week. We are engaged with it a sense of a holy spiritual mindset as we engage in the physical and the material, understanding that our responsibility to all aspects of God's world carries the same holy purpose.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, everybody. A reminder.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Good Shabbos. A reminder: the next Shabbos is Shua's bar mitzvah. He'll be called to the Torah and read from the Torah a week from this Shabbos, and that Sunday, the 21st, will be a soiree, a kind of a cocktails reception. Everybody that can make it, we look forward to seeing you.
Wait, where is the cocktail and what time? I have it written down on here, just the party, but I don't, Shua's party, but I don't have the...
The timing is Sunday, the 21st at 7 p.m.
7 p.m. Thank you.
Yep, at the Chabad.
At Chabad.
All right, everybody. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi.
All the very best. Bye, everybody.